We'll get started. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Conflict Management, Fierce and Crucial Conversations. Today is sponsored by the Central Valley Regional HR Hotline. My name is Anna Manzano, and I'm the Digital Media and Event Strategist here at the California Employers Association. Before we officially kick off today's training, I have just a couple details to cover with you. As you see, your audio is going to be muted for today's presentation, but there's going to be a lot of opportunities to engage during the session. If you have any questions pertaining to the presentation content, you can type them into the Q&A box at any time, and we'll do our best to address them as we go. We are fortunate to have our training and coaching director, Jessica Rivera, here, who will be assisting us with questions and handouts for this training. Those were sent out in yesterday's reminder email. However, I know that sometimes it ends up in your spam folder. Sometimes you just didn't happen. So I'm going to pop that into the chat box shortly. You'll see a PDF pop up and you can just click it and it'll download straight to your computer. So I'll do that in just a minute. Last but not least, we do have a survey. Because your feedback is so important to us here at CEA and our partners at Central Valley, we have a 5-question survey that literally takes less than 2 minutes to complete. But the feedback that you share with us in those 5 questions really helps us to continue to develop these trainings and just overall our entire suite of resources that we share with our partners over at Central Valley. And we use that to collectively make sure we're providing you with the best resources possible to run your teams, your departments, your companies with more peace of mind. So now I have the great privilege of introducing our trainer today. We have Keisha Hansen, who is our Learning and Development Director. I know we have lots of good stuff to cover. So Keisha, it's all yours.
Thank you so much. Welcome, everybody. I was trying to jot down all the different places you were from and that I've been to. Fresno, Bakersfield, Visalia, Modesto. Hello, good morning. I'm actually coming to you from down south, so San Juan Capistrano. So just lovely to have you here. And as Anna mentioned, this is in collaboration with Central Valley Regional Counties. And as a resource, they provide a hotline at no cost to you for you to call. And you'll notice the number that is directly related to your county that you can call. When you call this number at CEA Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, you will actually be connected with one of our HR directors, and you can ask them questions regarding any of the issues listed below, hiring and firing, or it can be easy as what is the minimum wage, because things change so fast in California that we want to provide you that peace of mind by providing you that information. So if you haven't taken advantage of that resource, please do. Who doesn't need some additional help these days with the pace of change that things happen, the laws that change? We want to give you peace of mind by providing that to you. So you have that in your handouts when you get them, or if you already have them. If you're joining us for the first time, very briefly, California Employers Association, we are a human resource association. We are based in Sacramento, but we serve employers throughout the entire state of California. And again, our goal is to provide our employers peace of mind with our human resource solutions, training such as today, recruiting, we do executive coaching. So any of that strikes your interest, you can give us a call and ask us more about that. And we'd be happy to answer your questions. On that same note, in terms of giving peace of mind, we want to give peace of mind to our lawyers today by telling you that I am not a lawyer. So this workshop should not be relied upon as legal advice. If you do feel like you need to consult an attorney and don't have one, we do partner with several law firms throughout the state of California. So again, use that 800 number and give us a call, and hopefully we can partner you with someone in your area. So today we are talking about conflict management, exciting stuff. And we'll hear maybe throughout the short time that we have some of the reasons maybe why you're here, why this piqued your interest. But it is something that is really important in the workplace. Conflict happens every day, not only in our professional lives, but in our personal lives as well. So it is really important to develop the skills in addressing conflict effectively and communicating effectively when we do have conflict in our organizations. Our hope today, again, in the short time, is to provide some resources, tools, maybe just some reminders for those of you who are more seasoned in dealing with conflict, oh gosh, yeah, I need to keep that in mind. In order how to address conflicts promptly and professionally. If you are a manager, knowing how conflict works and how to manage them effectively can make a huge difference in your career. And as I stated, we tend to think of these skills, we used to call them soft skills, we used to call them essential skills. These are critical skills. In order to be able to address conflict in the workplace, it's a critical skill and it will serve you throughout your career. And again, also in your personal life. So again, you came here for a reason. So we're going to start out with making this a little bit more personal. And this is anonymous. So I'm just going to pop up a poll on here. And let's see, got quite a few. How do you feel about conflict at work? And gave you some choices there. It's a single choice, so really think about it before you answer. And then if you do have another, you can put it in the chat. We're going at all cylinders here. You guys are great in terms of your response rates. Give it a few seconds since we have so many of you on here today, which we really appreciate and enjoy, actually. We love being able to interact with all of the different counties in California. Give you a few more seconds. Yeah. And it's overwhelmingly positive in terms of how you feel about conflict, which is great because a lot of people don't. So let me share the results here. So the top response was 49% answered that addressing conflict quickly can avoid issues to escalate, right? And that's so important, especially coming from an HR perspective, a compliance perspective. We don't want things to escalate and get out of hand. We want to be able to address them as soon as they come up, which is really important. 31%, it's an opportunity to find solutions to problems. Absolutely. We really can look at it from many different ways, depending on how we grew up and what our life experiences were. So looking at it more in a positive way to help find solutions, again, whether it's in work, whether it's in our personal lives, is really a great way, a great mindset to have. And then 7% had an other, so put that in the chat if you feel like it. I'm comfortable, not prepared. I think that should be uncomfortable, so maybe that would have changed your decision. Sorry about that. And then avoiding it at all costs, only 9% of you. So that's great. You're already halfway there if you don't look at, if you don't avoid conflict. But the next part of this, I do want you to jot down what words come to mind when you associate with conflict. I'm going to put my timer on the clock. So hopefully you have a pen and paper handy. Maybe you printed out your handouts traditionally like I like to. I like to put pen to paper, or you can just enter it maybe on your smartphone that's probably sitting right next to you. But for the next 30 seconds, just write, what are all those words that come up? Think about conflict. And you don't have to put that in the chat. This is just for you personally to reflect. We're about halfway there. About 15 more seconds. I know people don't like silence, so I'm trying to fill it in while you're writing. All right, so lift those pens up. And now what I'd like you to do is look at the answers that you jotted down, or again, that you mentally took note of, or put on your smartphone. How many of those were negative? How many of those words that you associate with conflict ended up being negative? And you can put your answer response to that in the chat. Were most of them negative? Was it half and half? Because again, this is half of the journey, is being able to look at conflict in a different mindset. Half and half. Okay, 4 out of 5 were negative. That tends to be more common. Most were negative. Half and half. Good. See, we've got so many different perspectives here, which is what it's all about. Awesome. Excellent. So again, that's part of exploring when we do feel maybe negatively about conflict, what arises, what comes up for us personally. And it is going to be different for everybody because we are different human beings. We all came from different backgrounds and different life experiences. And so for some of us, that might create a more negative connotation when we think of conflict. So directly from the dictionary, the definitions of conflict are, number one, pretty negative. A fight, a battle, a war, an armed conflict, competitive or opposing action of incompatibles. And then we get more positive in number two, which was also represented in the poll, an opportunity to engage in conversation with someone with a different viewpoint. So again, based on our own previous life experiences, some people might have more trepidations to address conflict in the workplace, or again, not negative connotations, and it may be based on negative experiences that they had. Maybe they had conflict, a lot of conflict in their own homes, or maybe they lived in an environment where there was extreme conflict in their communities, or maybe someone just wasn't brought up to address conflict. That maybe many of their family members just avoided conflict at all, and just kind of brushed things under the surface. But being part of a workforce, we really can't allow things to suffer under, be pushed under the rug, because things will bubble up, right? When we don't address conflict, it will escalate and it tends to get worse and worse. So it's really about partly changing our mindset into what am I going to learn from this? How can I engage with this other person? And a big part of dealing with conflict is having that two-way conversation, right? It's not just a one-way conversation. And I'm sure many of us can think of both professional and personal where it ended up being when it ended up being a negative one-way conversation and you just didn't even want to participate, right? That's where the conflict ended because you couldn't get anywhere. So again, another question is, why do we fall into conflict? And I'd love to hear your answers. And just again, think of your own personal experiences at work or in your personal lives. Why do we tend to fall into conflict? And just pop up a few answers there because we do have a lot of you with us today. So again, want to have your interactions. Yeah, just disagreeing on ideas, on different ways of doing things. Again, our own personal experiences will contribute to how we think about things. Good, excellent. Ignoring problems, right, until they get really, really bad or too bad to resolve. Good, these are all great. Yeah, we've all had experience, right? Yeah, people not performing, that's specific to, hey, we've got another Keisha in the room. Very good. Keisha, different perspectives, absolutely. Poor attitudes when interacting with others, right? Lack of understanding. These are awesome. Yes. And Jessica's monitoring, so she's giving you that feedback as well, that these comments are all great. One thing that we have learned, especially at CEA over the years with doing trainings for employers and members of the different organizations that we work with, is having emotional intelligence, is having that self-awareness when we're engaging in conflict. And if anybody's not familiar with emotional intelligence, it really is the ability to be able to recognize our own feelings and emotions that come up and arise, and how we manage those, and also the feelings of other people and how we manage and how we're aware of those. And interestingly enough, most people think they're pretty self-aware when it comes to themselves. Hey, yeah, Keisha, I know myself pretty well. I think I know how people perceive me and how I manage myself. Whereas research shows that only about 15% of people are truly very, very self-aware, because for one, it takes time, right? It takes time for us to stop and kind of observe how we're responding and reacting to things, in order to identify maybe some things we need to change in ourselves, right? And it also means we need to be open to changing and realizing some things about ourselves that maybe we can improve upon. So when we have self-awareness, we're aware of our emotions, our thoughts, our behaviors, and our triggers when we have situations that are in conflict. So when we have that, it can help us avoid reacting impulsively, communicating. We can communicate more clearly. We can empathize with others, and we can more easily find solutions. But we've all been in that situation where things got heated, right? When our emotions got the best of us, and we honestly just said or did something that we come to regret or just didn't end up in resolving the issue at all. So one of the things we encourage is using your emotional intelligence. And unlike our IQ, which pretty much solidifies when we're in our early adulthood, our emotional intelligence can improve and grow throughout our lives and throughout our careers. So really making an intentional effort to improve on that. So when you are in that situation where maybe someone made a negative comment or had an opinion that we didn't agree with, or maybe they behaved in a way that we felt really was in disagreement with ourselves, how do we usually respond? And again, put yourselves in that situation right now. Did you get an email recently where you thought, gosh, that was really a nasty email, and I'm going to respond right away to that email in an equally nasty way, right? It's our emotions. It's getting the best of us. And so if we don't have that emotional intelligence, we don't know what our triggers are, it can get out of hand. It can get the best of us. When we pause, when we stop and say, gosh, do I have enough information? Did I read this email correctly? Do I really need more facts in order to process how I'm going to respond? And if I still am kind of unclear, do I need to actually pick up the phone or organize a meeting in person? Because I'll let you know a little fun fact, email is our default communication. And there's so many ways we can misinterpret and misunderstand the message that someone is sending us simply through email, right? So when we're really in an issue of conflict and it's sensitive and it's getting emotional, we don't want to react via an email, right? So part of using our emotional intelligence is, how am I going to best respond to this situation or this email? And then also, how can I do that and not react, right? And another reminder is that email sticks around forever, right? So people can always use that against us. So when in doubt, pick up the phone and have that conversation offline. So another thing to consider, and we've kind of already referenced it a little bit, is according to this quote, we don't see things as they are, we see them as we are. So basically what that means is we are subjective as humans, and we are influenced by our own experiences, our own beliefs, and our own biases. So you can have two people witness an event and have completely different interpretations of what happened based on their own unique experiences and perspective. Therefore, it's so important for us to be aware of what our own biases might be and perspectives when interacting with others and interpreting the world around us. When we do that, we can strive to be more open-minded and empathetic towards others who may have a different viewpoint and perspective than us. And then this is really crucial, and you've probably seen it in a lot of recent articles if you follow different organizations and posts and such. That empathy is really the most critical skill if you are in a position of leadership to have. According to research, people who have managers who share empathy, who show empathy, they're more likely to stick around. And you know that that's an issue for a challenge for many of us in the last few years with the Great Resignation and employees reconsidering if their work environment was what they really wanted. And I'm sure we've all heard that term, employees leave managers, they don't leave companies. And that's the people who really have the influence, right? Who set the example, who set the tone. And if they're not showing they care, and if they're not having an open mind to listen and hear other people's ideas and opinions and perspectives, then people will start looking elsewhere. But when you do have that in your leadership, right? Again, they are setting the tone, they are setting the example, they are helping to create that employee culture, right? So the benefits of that is increased innovation, People are more engaged, knowing that it's safe for them to give their different opinions. People are more likely to stay, knowing that I can share my own opinion. I'm bringing my true self. So it's emphasizing inclusivity. And then if I have an issue, if I have a concern with my manager, maybe I need some extended time off, that I know that they're actually going to listen and they're going to share and they're going to really weigh that versus just saying, oh, we're understaffed. We need you here. We can't give you that time off, right? It makes a huge difference to employees, whether they stay or whether they start looking for someone else. So it really is, as this quote is stating, the glue that holds together our workplaces, bringing that human connection between employees. And then here's just another little question, although we're listing some of them already, but what are some of the types of conflict at work that you have observed, hopefully that you haven't been a part of, but what are some of the common types of conflict that happen at work? I'd love to hear from you. In addition, of course, it can be task-based, right? The way we do tasks, the way we feel about tasks. We do a training revolved around strengths finders and identify people's strengths. And some people are activators. They want to get things done. They want to execute. They just want to go, 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 go. And you might have people on your team that are more analytical, right? They want to get all the details down before we start, right? So that can cause some headbutting, right? In terms of the person, we don't need the details. We just need to get this done right away. Whereas the other people are like, well, pause on this. Let's hold off on doing that. That can create some conflict on a team. Resources that might be available or that people need that they don't have. Different ways of working. Some people like to work till the very last second to get something done, and some people need a lot of time. They need to be quiet in their work environments. Just different personalities that clash. You might have that really charismatic, outgoing person who likes to engage in a lot of conversation. You have other people who might like to focus on the tasks that they have to do, put them in a cubicle together. That might create some issues, and not to mention the cultural differences that we all have, where we grew up, how we grew up, even just cultural in terms of different work industries. So you may be coming from a very kind of laid back, informal work environment and then coming into a more corporate formal environment. And so that might be kind of a cultural shock to you, and allowing people to kind of adapt to those differences rather than just saying, well, in my previous work, this is how we did it, or telling a new employee, well, this is how we do it here, right? Those can create some conflicts as well. And we wouldn't be an HR association if we didn't point out that some conflict, if it's not addressed and not resolved effectively, can lead to lawsuits, right? So we as managers and leaders really need to be cognizant of how we address conflict and how we manage it in our organizations and in our departments. And of course, if you get in the weeds, you can always use that hotline number and give us a call and say, hey, I've got this situation, which happens to us on a daily basis, right? But some of them might be based on people, employees not having their needs met. And maybe it is revolving around somebody with a disability or somebody who wants to go on pregnancy leave and not being familiar with the leaves, and then that creates conflict. Then you have perception. If you're in a position of leadership and you're a manager, and maybe someone is interpreting that you are being inconsistent with the treatment of all employees. Maybe you're allowing some people to come in late and then someone else is getting written up or getting a verbal warning. That could create some issues, right? We're all familiar with how people can use their power unfairly when maybe the company's values really aren't being aligned with what their actions are. And then just in general, when our emotions get the best of us. And unfortunately, we have seen when emotions can escalate to an extreme point in a workplace and result in violence, right? So not to scare you at all, but just to say that it can be very impactful for an organization if we don't address things. And unfortunately, a lot of times things have been brushed under the carpet, and then people get to a point where they're like, gosh, we need some help and I need to call CEA. and we do our best to provide some guidance, or ultimately maybe refer you to legal counsel. But let's get back on the positive bus here and talk about the benefits of having what we call healthy debate, right? Healthy conflict and healthy debate. When you have that in a work environment, first of all, it creates a really positive work environment. It promotes growth within that work environment because, again, it's creating that safe space so that when you do have differences of opinion, you do have different perspectives, that you're going to have that mutual respect and honor that people have different ways of thinking, different ideas and different opinions, and that can lead to creativity and innovation, right? Do we all want a work environment where everybody thinks the same, where everybody acts the same? I hope not, because we have a lot of differences of opinion at CEA, and we're able to manage that and allow people to have those differences and come to a solution together. Or sometimes agree to disagree, right? It can also promote development of our own interpersonal skills. Again, we're using this not only in our personal lives or our work lives, but also our personal lives. So we can just become better and better in our own jobs and our own relationships. At the very least, we can understand people better, right? When we start having that open mind and start recognizing that we might have a bias about something and allowing someone who has a different way of thinking or comes from a different culture than us, we can understand their point of view. We've experienced a lot of change in the last few years, so having that healthy debate on when we're making changes in our organizations and why it might benefit the organization can promote not only social change, but change within the organization itself and can lead to progress, right? We have to stay competitive in the workforce and advance, right, and progress. We can't stay stuck, even though some of us don't like a lot of change and hesitate for change. We have to stay progressive, and we're in such a huge transformation right now in our workforce with change. So that really benefits to have those healthy debates and see things from other people's perspectives. And then again, we can become stronger in terms of when our viewpoint is challenged. And that can promote more originality and us able to, again, be more reflective and self-aware. And we're familiar with the costs of conflict. Unfortunately, it can impact stress on our health and well-being, and that is at an all-time high in our workforce. So we want to make sure that we're not over imparting or unnecessarily imparting stress amongst our workforce. It can result in lower productivity, right? If it's ongoing, if it's not being addressed, people's needs aren't being resolved. Lower interpersonal cohesion, right? We don't really want to collaborate when there's ongoing conflict with people. Maybe we spend too much time in trying to resolve issues when we don't have the skills, and ultimately bad decisions can be made, or it can end up costing an organization a lot of money if it ends up in mediation or other legal costs. So, pointing out very briefly, this is the Thomas Kilmann model of conflict, and it really identifies the 5 different ways that we address conflict in the world. And what they point out on the grid, as you can see it, it's according to how cooperative we are when we're engaged in conflict and how assertive we are. And research has shown that we default to 1 or 2, again, because we're kind of creatures of habit and we're used to that. So if we tend to avoid, we avoid more. If we don't compete, then maybe we tend to not compete. But sometimes these can be helpful in different situations. And you see our favorite there is avoidance, but hopefully we don't use that too often. So avoidance, again, it's uncooperative and unassertive. So we're kind of losing out in the situation. And we've just shown some of the ultimate consequences in the workplace when we're avoiding conflict. But there are some areas where it can be helpful. So sometimes somebody comes at us with a situation, and we don't have all the facts, right? So we need to kind of hold off in terms of how we're going to respond to the situation while we gather that information, right? Or maybe it's just bad timing. Maybe we've just come off a really difficult meeting or a really difficult conversation, or maybe we've just had a bad day in general at work. Maybe I'm not prepared mentally to address this conflict right now. So we're going to pick a different time. So those are some times when avoidance is okay, but you don't want to go permanently avoiding that situation. And then accommodate is very cooperative, but unassertive. So we usually use it when we think the issue might be more important to the other person. And again, you can think of instances when we do this in our personal lives. A very basic one is deciding what you're going to eat for dinner, or where you're going to go out to dinner, letting someone else choose. You're accommodating them. They really want to go out for Mexican food or Chinese food or get some pizza. And you're just like, oh, they can have that right now. And you do that because you want to maintain the relationship, right? You don't want some conflict, unnecessary conflict on something like eating pizza. Also, it seems more important to the other person, and maybe they will do it they will be reciprocal at some point in accommodating you. And then sometimes we just go, yeah, gosh, I really would like some pizza. So yeah, let's go for the pizza, right? So maybe we're in the wrong, and just having that conversation, we realize that. You have to be careful with always accommodating, though, because people who accommodate in issues of conflict all the time, they can get taken advantage of at times, right? So sometimes we do have to stand our ground. The next one is competing, and it's very assertive, less cooperative. And of course, we want to be competitive in the market. We want to be competitive when we're working with our competitors in terms of gaining clients and customers and proposals and bids. But we don't really want to be competitive internally, because we're not building relationships, we're not supporting each other. And yes, you may have a sales team who has different competitive initiatives, but overall, you want that supportive environment. You want people to be able to have each other's backs. You don't want it to always be butting heads, and my idea is better than your idea, and my presentation's going to win. You really want to think of the overall cohesiveness of the team. So be competitive. Again, you can use it externally, internally, maybe when there is something really important that you just know is right. You really want to you really want to stand for yourself, for your values of your employees. There may be situations in that where you're saying, yeah, I'm really going to stand up for this. I really think I'm right. But again, you're going to do it in a respectful manner. The other one is compromise. We're given a little, we're assertive, and we're cooperative. And it's really works best when both parties are mutually understanding each other, right? We're both going to lose, we're both going to gain a little. And sometimes it's just done because we don't have the time. We need to get it done. So that's when we do compromise. And then collaborate is I win, you win, right? It's again using assertiveness and cooperative. And it's really the most satisfying because it's where everybody has a say. Everybody has an opinion that they can contribute to the conversation, to the conflict, to trying to resolve an issue, a problem. The only thing is sometimes in certain environments, it can be overused and it can take a lot of time, right? Getting all of those different opinions and perspectives in line and ultimately coming to a decision and taking action. So all of these are the 5 common ways that we address conflict. So just kind of, again, going back to our emotional intelligence, looking at those and saying, gosh, what do I tend to do? And is there a better way of doing it? And am I defaulting to something just because I'm comfortable, whether it be accommodating or avoiding or even competing, right? Do I always have to be right? So thinking of what is the best way to go about it. And so if we're not thinking about these things, we can not handle conflict well. And what occurs when we don't handle conflict well? Have you ever been in that environment? I'm sure you have. But when we don't, and again, a lot of it comes at us, right? Things are happening. We're just working so fast, and someone brings us something, and it ignites our fight or flight, right? It's a human response, and we let our emotions get the best of us, and so it can do a lot of things. It can damage our relationships with that person. It catches us off guard, so we get defensive, or we just say things off the top of our heads, and we don't realize that that's going to be hurtful to the other person. We're all human. We've all done or said something at one point in our lives that later we regretted. And a lot of it becomes from that initial reaction, right? Not the thoughtful process of emotions, and being self-aware and aware of the other person's perspective. And a lot of times when we don't respond with thoughtfulness, we react, then the issue gets worse, right? It's like fighting fire with fire. It's always recommended not to do that. But sometimes, again, being human, that's what happens. So, one thing, again, to keep in mind is knowing that this is a two-way dialogue, right? When we're engaging in trying to resolve issues that come about when there is conflict, that it's a two-way dialogue, right? And when we really commit ourselves to allowing that other person to share their own insights, so that we can reach a different result and have some deeper relationships with that person or with that group or whoever we're talking to, right? But it's really about staying in that dialogue. I think we can all think of times when maybe we gave someone the cold shoulder because we just didn't, want to say anything for fear that we would say the wrong thing, or we were hurt, again, in our personal lives and in our work lives. And we can't allow that to happen in our work lives because it can really impact, not only the environment, but productivity, people getting things done. I've heard of, instances when we get calls from employers, two employees aren't even talking to each other. They're not responding to their emails. And we can't have that in a work environment, right? Because we want to continue to be productive and engaging and have each other's backs. So one thing is, what is the crucial conversation that we need to have right now? Because you came here for a reason. And what are they? So according to the book with the same name, Crucial Conversations, which I highly recommend, it's when things are, when the circumstances are getting really high. So the stakes are high. We need to make a decision. We need to resolve something. When our opinions are really varying, and nobody's budging, right? Nobody's compromising. Nobody's accommodating. And then when the emotions are elevated, and you can think of some things that have happened recently with a lot of the major companies with layoffs, right? That's an emotional decision to make whether we're laying off employees or not. So you can imagine that emotions are going to get a little elevated, especially for those, well, not especially, but even for those who are remaining, right? Because they're going to be taking on more responsibilities. How did the organization relay the information about the layoff? So that would be a crucial conversation, right, to have with the team, to talk it out, and see where everybody's at. So we can only begin with ourselves in terms of having that conversation. So what you want to do, again, before we react emotionally, is ask ourselves, how do we want things to go, right? So here are some 4 questions. What do I really want for myself when I have this conversation? What do I want for others? What do I want for the relationship? Is the relationship important to me? Is it someone I work with on a daily basis? Is it someone that maybe I see once a year? Is it really important to have this conversation? For the most part, it would probably be with people that you work with on a day-to-day basis that you want to resolve the conflicts and issues with. Or if you're in a position of HR, that it's going to impact a department or a team. And then how would I behave if I really wanted these results, right? And what it helps us do is form some healthy goals about what we want from that conversation versus unhealthy goals. So again, when we're thinking emotionally and thinking back to that email that we thought we interpreted inappropriately, or we thought it was mean-spirited, we might have some unhealthy goals initially in terms of, oh, I'm going to write right back and I'm going to be equally mean-spirited, or I know I'm right on this situation, so I'm really going to put it in their face and I'm going to say that I'm right. I want to look good. Sometimes keeping the peace, people think is a good solution, but again, it's not really getting to the core of the issue or resolving the problem. It's just getting kind of swept under the rug, so to speak. Again, our competition might come in place where we really want to win the argument, and maybe that's not the best way to go about it. Or we're blaming someone and not really looking at the situation itself. And again, some of us just avoid altogether. So we really want to think about those questions and then incorporate healthy goals. What am I going to learn from this conversation? What truth am I going to gather? Because maybe there's some facts that I don't know about this person or this situation or the way they think, and hopefully get some results so we can move forward together. And ultimately, by having that conversation, we strengthen our relationship, right? Because if you think of our personal relationships, if we avoid people, if we avoid talking to them, does that strengthen the relationship? Does that build trust with each other? No, it does the exact opposite. So the same goes in hand. So again, by having that conversation, we also want to look for what is the mutual purpose? What do we both want to get out of this conversation? What am I hoping that the other person is thinking about as well? And sharing that you actually care about what their goals and interests and values are. And you hope that and believe that they care about yours, right? You're creating that safe environment. Um, and just keeping in mind, confrontation is a search for the truth, right? I don't know what everybody's thinking. I don't know what their perspectives are. So I'm trying to find that. And I'm going to do that in a very positive and thoughtful way. One thing we see that happens that can tend to escalate a conflict is when we focus on the personality and not the behavior, right? We say, oh, that person's just really a horrible person, but we're not really giving any examples of how they're being a horrible person. So, examples here, kind of the opposite, just acknowledging that someone's a nice person and letting them know isn't really giving them a lot of information. Gosh, you're a nice person, Jessica. But Jessica's wondering, well, why am I nice? Why do you think that? So really focusing on the behavior, and this can apply when we're talking about performance and giving feedback on that. We really want to focus on the behavior and the actions. So being specific with Jessica and saying, gosh, you make a point of saying hello to everyone every day. That's so nice, right? And then with the negative, calling someone lazy, again, that's going to put up defense walls, exponentially. Whereas if you just focus on the behavior and say, gosh, Jessica, you haven't asked customers for all the information we need on the applications, and get some information from her as to why. It could be a simple thing that Jessica didn't know she was supposed to ask for all of that information, right? But we're making assumptions and judgments rather than actually getting all of the information. So one thing in the book, Crucial Conversations, which is if you take one thing away from this session that we're having, they say if conditions are safe, you can say almost anything and people will listen, right? So thinking ahead of time when you're having that difficult conversation with people, and 65% of people who avoid conflict avoid it because they're worried about how the other person is going to respond to them. So if we create that safe space, right? Then the person's more likely going to listen, right? So it's setting the boundaries, it's being aware of yourself, knowing that you are managing your own emotions, that your words that you're communicating are aligning with your body language and your tone. You're being present when the other person is speaking, you're actively listening, you don't have your smartphone and all the notifications going off, people aren't interrupting you. You're being authentic, you're being optimistic, you're using the right language, you're really relaying that you want to understand people, their other perspective, you're withholding your biases, your opinions, um, and and you're creating that safe space, right? And it's a lot. Uh, it's a lot, and it takes practice, right? But again, if you create that safe space for a person, they're more likely going to be able to reciprocate that and speak and act the same way, right? And especially if in your a position of leadership, you're setting the tone, you're setting the example for others, and if they see that behavior over and over again, they're more likely to start acting like that equally because they're seeing the results. And we know not every situation is ideal, and not every situation is going to create a safe environment. So if you even think that something might not be safe when you're engaging in a potential conflict discussion with someone, have someone else there in the room, right? Have someone, if you have security, if it's going to escalate to that extent, always try and create that safety for yourself. But again, that's so impactful to me, is creating that safe space so that people really feel heard. So one of the recommendations from Crucial Conversations, or a model that they use, is an acronym, which we use a lot of those in the workplace, called STATE. And it's really preparing you for what to say and how to say it, which we've been talking a lot about during our session. So the what skills are really initiating the conversation by sharing your facts. And sharing your facts is really going to and making it known to the other person, this is what I know to be true, is really going to put the person a little bit more at ease. It's going to diffuse a little bit, like, this is what I consider to be the truth, right? So you share your facts, what you know to be true, and then tell your story. And what tell your story means is, this is what the potential consequences or results of these actions could be for this situation, right? You don't know for a fact, that's why it's called a story. So you're telling your side of it. And then once you've finished doing both of those, then you initiate asking for the other's path, which means this is their opportunity to disagree, to fill in some of the facts that might be missing, to see what they think some of the results or consequences could be. And then the how is, how are you going to share this information, right? And again, we want to put somebody at ease. We want to put them in a safe space. So we're going to talk tentatively. We're going to talk with care. We're not going to be accusatory in our conversations. We're going to use words that are neutral. We're going to use words using I, so that we don't seem like we're attacking the other person. We're not going to be judgmental, saying that's dumb. I think this is just wrong, right? Because again, you're putting up that wall and you're not giving that person a true opportunity to respond back. And encourage testing, again, is just asking them, hey, is there something that I got wrong? Is there something that I'm missing that you can share with me that will help this situation or resolve this situation? So here's a quick one. We're getting low on time, but here's a situation, and just want to hear, how would you approach it? Sarah's the lead on a big project at work. Her coworker, Jason, has something negative to say in every meeting. We've all been there, right? Sarah and fellow coworkers have noticed the negative attitude, and Jason rolling his eyes in meetings as well. Jason also has a tendency to interrupt others. A few peers have mentioned now that they feel awkward in the meetings. So what would you do? And you can talk about, what would you think about in terms of how would you approach Jason, since you are the lead on this project? How would you go about it, right? Any ideas from many of you that are on this call? So would we immediately call Jason out and say you have a bad attitude? Would that be a good idea in front of everybody? No. Yes, absolutely. Okay. I know it takes a little while to write things in the chat. Awesome. This is great. Yeah, no, thank you, Mia. No. Sarah could meet with Jason in advance to try and get his feedback and collaborate with him prior to the meeting to address his concern before the larger group. Ask for a private meeting. Awesome. Give him more responsibility on the project. That could be, right? Maybe he wanted to be the project lead, but the next best thing is to have him be a co-lead or to give him more responsibility. Great one. Again, speaking privately, discuss his behaviors, right? These are the facts that we know that's happening. Talking about basic respect, just finding out what's going on. Awesome. Why is he acting like this? It could be something that we don't know that's happening in his personal life, or again, maybe he was going for the lead on this project as well. But again, we're going to talk about what could happen, right? We have people who aren't feeling comfortable. I love this one. Have them take minutes. Have them take the minutes, right? Yeah. But share the facts of what you see he does one-on-one. Ask his feedback. And it may be unintentional, right? We're all human. We're all going to have those days. If you haven't noticed, I have kind of an expressive face. So people usually know when I'm in a bad mood, or I might unintentionally roll my eyes at something. So I got to be careful, right? I have to watch that my body language is aligning with what I'm saying, and that I'm saying things in a neutral tone. And if I need a minute because I am feeling triggered, I need to step out of the room, right? But I love it. All of the comments are great. Setting those expectations in advance when we are having meetings of how people should conduct themselves. And we all need a reminder, even though people, learn this in kindergarten, right? Of how to act and behave. A lot of times we need reminders of of how to act, or what conduct is accepted, or what is appropriate, or what is not appropriate. It can be as simple as, let's leave our smartphones outside of the room. Let's allow everybody to share their opinions and ideas. So here's some additional tips that we can use for facilitating those crucial conversations, for engaging in that healthy conflict, is keeping your language as simple and as clear, direct, and neutral. Like I think I mentioned just earlier, when our words that we're communicating don't align with our body language, our tone, what do you think people are paying most attention to? They're paying attention to our body language, our nonverbal communication. So that's why when we're emailing, we can't pick up on those nonverbal cues and clues unless people are writing all in caps, or they're using certain emojis that can kind of give us a clue. But we rely on that as human beings. So we want to make sure that's in alignment. We want to make sure that when we're sharing communication and we're trying to get our message across, that our tone is neutral, right? It's okay to get excited and enthusiastic about things, but when it's a conflict, when we're trying to address something that's really sensitive or controversial, or we want to be in that neutral state. So keeping things clear, direct, and neutral. And for all of us, not all of us are wordsmiths that can really say things off the cuff. So you may need to write it down. You may need to prepare for these in advance, right? There's nothing wrong with that. Obviously, we don't want to get to the point where we're name calling or finger pointing, which again can be based on our emotions getting the best of us. So taking a moment, if we feel that coming on, rescheduling a meeting, or stepping away if we're already in the meeting and things are getting a little escalated. We already mentioned, but avoiding sentences that start with you, because when we start with you, that's already kind of an accusatory tone. When we say, I think, I believe, in my opinion, that can diffuse a little bit of the situation, and it's not putting the other person on defense so much. Saying and, this is a huge one to overcome, but we use the word but a lot. We interrupt, and saying and, trying to say and, even if you're in disagreement with someone, yes, I'm hearing that from you, and I'd like to also suggest so and so. When we use the word but, again, it's putting up those defenses. People are feeling like they weren't really heard or understood. So we want to try and interject and in the place of but it is a habit that we all have become accustomed to. So it's hard to change. And then again, if you're about to have a difficult conversation, and you don't know what to do or where to start, revisit this list or make a checklist of your own. Here's another one. Make sure that you're in the right mindset mentally, right? Again, you might have had something bad happen, or you may be overworked or overburdened, and you just can't have that conversation today. Make sure that you are in the right mindset, that you are considering the other person's point of view, so that you can keep it a two-way dialogue. And then the venting is for somebody else. It's for your best friend at work, or it's for your partner. It's for someone who you can vent to beforehand, so that you won't get all emotionally charged when you're in that conversation. And then again, planning your message, writing it down, making sure you have some bullet points of what you want to cover, and preparing for how that person may respond or react. What is the worst case scenario that is going to happen, right? Because when we do avoid things, right, which tends to be procrastination about having that conversation, that's usually worse than actually having the conversation and getting it done with, right? Because we start projecting what's going to happen and what the worst case scenarios are versus the reality. And then logistically, we always want to make sure, if we can, pick the right time. If it's an urgent issue, we want to be able to address it immediately, right? If it's interrupting the workplace, if it's ending up in something potentially violent, we want to get involved right away. But if not, we want to select the right time and the right place and make sure maybe it's a mutual place like a meeting room, so you don't have that authoritative feel like your people are in the same place, right? We're meeting people where they are. Hopefully those were helpful. And just making sure that you recognize that this really is a critical skill, and it impacts the workplace. So we want to learn how to assess the conflict. How do we need to get involved? How can we prepare for it? How can we create that safe space for everyone to have that productive conversation and make conflict a healthy way of how we work in the environment that we're in? Because when conflicts are managed successfully, it does result in the increased engagement, productivity, and innovation, which when people have that, they do their best work. Hopefully not all of you, but we've been in those places where we haven't had that work environment. So it helps promote that positive work culture to have everybody do what they do best. So I think we got out right on time. I will pass it back over to my colleague Anna, who will let you know about the survey and the HRCI codes that you will get today. Thank you for joining us, everyone.
Yes, I was just pulling those off of my notes. Oh, I see someone raise their hand. Pop a question into the chat if you have a question. Oh, unless that was a mistake, apologies. Here are your codes. They're on the screen. I'm also entering them into the chat today. HRCI code 651644, SHRM code 24-YCW7Z. Those are always fun to say. Like we said, we do have a very brief survey. It's 5 questions. It typically takes everyone 90 seconds, 2 minutes at most to complete. But the feedback that you give us does help us to develop these trainings. What did you like? What can we improve on next time? We take all that to heart to make sure that we are providing you with the best trainings and resources possible. We want to thank Irene and the entire Central Valley Regional HR Hotline team for bringing you all here and producing this event for you. We do have quite a few coming up, so I'm going to make sure that when we do our follow-up that you have a link to the upcoming events. So thank you guys all for coming. Those are very kind words. Thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing you again. And thank you, Keisha, and thank you, Jessica, for sharing your expertise with us today. Have a great day, everyone. Cheers.